Hi, Tom.
Hello,
Uh,
moderators.
yeah, you know some Armenian words already. So, 2013 is behind us, and there were a lot of dramatic events in the region and in Armenia as well. But one of the most important questions that comes to my mind, and many people are discussing these days, that caused a major shift in Armenian foreign policy as well as Armenian politics is Armenia's decision to join customs union. Uh, what we can expect from this U-turn that Armenian President Serge Sarkisyan took in September last year? Would there be any qualitative change in Armenia in general and in Armenian politics in particular? I'm talking about totalitarian or autocratic.
Well, that's a big question. It has many parts to it. Obviously, there's the domestic political part of that question when it comes to Armenia, and then there's the question about the customs union in general. To start with the customs union in general, obviously, Armenia has made a commitment to join, but this is quite a long-term process. I think Armenia and I think Serge Sarkisyan President Serge Sarkisyan wanted to keep his options open. He wanted both Europe and Russia, and basically for political reasons and also because of Russian pressure, he was forced to make a choice, and he chose, obviously, Russia. But I think the customs union, there are big question marks over whether the customs union will work, actually, and we're beginning to see some pushback, some complaints from President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan and President Lukashenko in Belarus. Everyone has different ideas about what this customs union consists of. They see it as more of a tighter economic union, certainly Kazakhstan does. And obviously Vladimir Putin sees it as some kind of more of a political project. So I think we're going to see some problems with how this customs union begins to work, and question marks as to whether this customs union will work in any case, and whether it will actually function properly.
Yeah, one more question about this customs union. Why do you think Armenian government is now pushing so hard to speed up the process? What even Russian officials admit that Armenia is unusually is pushing really unusually hard to speed up this process of joining. For example, how they developed this roadmap, how quickly they signed it, and what do you think? What is the motive, the reason behind this quick rush?
Well, I guess the reason is that Armenia doesn't want to be left in a vacuum. There was 3 years very good work done on the association agreement with the European Union. A lot of very careful work was done. Suddenly, Armenia did a U-turn, switched course, and now I think this was a course which was quite difficult to change. It was quite an unpopular decision in many parts of Armenia, but it's better, I guess, if you're the Armenian government, to push ahead and get the benefits from this union with Russia rather than be left with nothing. I guess that's what's going on. Let me just
Yeah.
answer your question about the domestic political side
Yes.
of the customs union. I do think this basically does have a domestic political element. I think that there is a strong. I think society actually is less pro-Russian in Armenia than the political elite. I think society, obviously, people want to see Russia as the security provider for Armenia. They want links with Russia. But I think you're seeing over the last 10 years Armenian society growing up and saying Armenia is Armenia, Russia is Russia, and not wanting this kind of rather colonial relationship with Russia, which the customs union provides. However, the political elite, as we know, is quite pro-Russian. Even looking at former President Ter-Petrosyan is also making some very pro-Russian statements in the last year or two. And I think Serge Sarkisyan felt pressure. He felt pressure from Prosperous Armenia, from Gagit Tsarukyan, from his predecessor, Robert Kocharyan, And one of the reasons he made this decision was, as it were, to kind of not to face a kind of pro-Russian domestic threat inside Armenia, to get the support of the Kremlin.
Do you think that was real? That the pressure, I mean, actually, there is an impression that all these opposition groups, including former, government officials, have joined forces, to sort of like force Serge Sarkisyan into this customs union. They were very pro-Russian and they were threatening revolt, actually. But was this real threat to Serge Sarkisyan? Do you think he had no power to withstand this pressure?
Well, I think it's not a threat in the present day, but Serge Sarkisyan is a chess player. He likes to try and think several moves ahead, if not for the strategic vision of the country, at least in terms of politics. And I think he's looking ahead to 2018. He sees that his own power base will be threatened in 2018. Possibly, and maybe it's too early to talk about this, he wants to change the constitution and keep some kind of power inside Armenia. And obviously a very good insurance policy for doing that is to get the support of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. But obviously this is all speculation.
And there is a concern among Armenian civic groups, activists, that with this joining with customs union and getting closer to Kremlin would spell trouble for them, because Armenian government will become more autocratic in its behavior in terms of freedom of speech, and all other freedoms, and they are afraid that joining the club of totalitarian regimes will spoil also the Armenian politics. What do you think about that? Actually, 3 members of this customs union are well known as autocratic regimes, right?
Yes, I mean, I think it certainly doesn't improve Armenia's prospects for full democracy, and obviously the European model implies, joining a club of democracies, whereas the customs union path means joining a club of authoritarian regimes. But having said that, I think Armenia still has elements of a democracy in parliament. The media is not completely free, but it's that you hear different voices in the media. Society is quite active, so I think it's not possible for Serge Sarkisyan to put a lid on Armenian society, even if he wants to. And he still wants to keep his options open as well. He doesn't want to close the door to Europe, and to the United States, and he knows that if he becomes more autocratic, then he gets in trouble with Brussels and with Washington, and he has problems with diaspora. So he's still trying to ride. I think the problem of being any Armenian leader, and this is obviously true of Serge Sarkisyan, he's trying to ride different horses at the same time, and he's afraid of falling off.
And one question about the economy. As we know, the Armenian economy is in very bad shape, and it's getting worse and worse due to the, I would describe it, exodus of its population. And we'll see, tens of thousands of people leaving the country almost every year. And is there any chance that the Armenian government can really offer quick fixes to this problem, or do you think Moscow will help? What's the option there? Is there any way to stop this exodus, to stop this economic downturn?
Well, there's a long-term part to that question and the short-term. The long-term part to that question is the Armenian economy will not improve basically until the borders open with Azerbaijan and with Turkey, until Armenia becomes a kind of regional market in the region, communications open. That's the long-term problem for Armenia, that its foreign policy challenges and its economy are closely connected. I guess the short-term answer to that question is how to maximize the potential of what you have at the moment with all the problems of the closed borders. And clearly there are short-term things you can do, which is that you can you can force some of the rich oligarchs in the country to pay their taxes, to share their profits. You can promote small business, you can break up monopolies, but that obviously also has a political problem in the sense that because you are also, these are your friends, these are the people who you are relying on for political support. I think all of this shows that to be the president of Armenia at the moment, you have very little room for maneuver, and this is why external players such as Russia in particular have lots and lots of levers of pressure on you.
So in terms of the oligarchy that is holding control of the economy and actually also politics, you think this system will not be dismantled in a near future? Are we going to live with this for at least foreseeable future?
I think what we saw President Sargsyan trying to do in his first term was trying to gently to reform the system without changing it completely. He wanted to open up the European option. He wanted to cut the power of some oligarchs while still maintaining being at the top of the pile of the system. You know, it was quite a difficult operation to perform, and as we could see, it didn't work because the European option was basically closed down for him by Moscow for the time being at the moment. So he's in his second term, he's got many fewer options. There's no immediate prospect of normalization with Turkey. The Russians seem to have more political and economic power. So I just don't see how he could change the system without undermining himself completely.
Tom, do you think his efforts, to stay close to Europe are genuine, or he's just playing, as you said, as a chess player, playing his options smartly? What do you think?
I think they're genuine. They were genuine as a kind of foreign policy choice. That the idea of Armenia wanting to have multiple partners with the US, with the diaspora in the US and Europe, with Brussels, with Russia, with Iran. That's a very sensible foreign policy to try and have as many friends as possible when you're in an isolated and poor country like Armenia. But was the president sincere about the kind of European democratization agenda, the reform of the economy, and so on? That's a much harder question to answer. We have to be a bit skeptical about that. Clearly, I think some members of the government were sincere about that. They do want to see reform, but certainly, it's impossible to rebuild a house without rebuilding the foundations, and Serge Sargsyan did not want to rebuild the foundations of his whole administration.
And with this Armenia's U-turn towards Moscow and customs union, do you think is Armenia losing its significance for Russia and for outside world or the other world, or it's becoming more important for Russia? What do you think? Is there any foreign policy motivation in this shift or not for Russia, for example?
Well, I mean, we have to start from the first principle that Armenia does not have great geopolitical significance. It has it, and this is true of the Caucasus as a whole, it has it from time to time on this issue or that issue, but it's not, Armenia, it's not a significant part of world economy or world political calculations. The decision to join the customs union means that Armenia scores some nice points in Moscow. It can expect some favorable treatment, economic treatment on issues like energy and gas and maybe military equipment. So that guarantees, Armenia in survival in the short term. But let's be clear about this. Armenia is not a first-order priority for Russia. If we look at Russian foreign policy, Ukraine, maybe Kazakhstan are really the really important neighbors for Russia.
And looking into the Maidan, what's happening in Maidan, and it seems to me that Ukrainians are really are not going to give up this European. What is your prediction? How it will finish there? Will the opposition win, or you think Yanukovych will win? And do you think also this will also have the huge impact on Armenia and other parts of the world, of our world?
Well, I think the way Ukraine is constructed, no one can ever just completely win one side or the other. Ukraine, cannot live without Europe, and the pro-European elements in Ukraine will not give up and go home. But equally, Ukraine also needs its relationship with Russia. So it's this constant matter of compromise and balancing in Ukraine. Clearly, and I think the problem with President Yanukovych is that he's tried for a both-and strategy and ended up with a neither-nor strategy. He's ending up with neither Europe nor Russia. And I think Ukrainian politics will be very interesting this year, particularly ahead of a new presidential election in 2015, when I think Yanukovych will be in really, really big trouble. And I think, it will be very hard for him to stay in power. So I think 2015 will be very interesting for Ukraine, and that will also have some impact for Armenia as well. But clearly, there's a lot of time between now and then.
Tom, do you think that Vladimir Putin is gaining strength, is getting stronger, or what is happening in Russia now? On one hand, he's getting stronger on the foreign policy, arena, but he's losing in domestic politics. What do you think? What do you give us your prediction about Russia in 2014?
Well, I think the easy days are behind him for Vladimir Putin. Maybe he would have been wise to to leave and to let someone else be president, because the first 2 terms he saw this strengthening Russia, economic growth, rise of a new middle class. Russia was basically a success story, and that's obviously no longer the case. He's got these huge economic problems, which I think they're not huge at the moment, maybe, but they can only get bigger, connected with and social problems, connected with all the social services in Russia. He's got the problem of the North Caucasus and so on. So I think Putin is good at kind of projecting a strong image. He's good at Armenia, but in the long term, Russia is basically going nowhere under Vladimir Putin, and I think that he probably will face more and more different sources of opposition from different social groups, nationalist groups, pro-European groups, North Caucasian groups. That those protests are going to get bigger. Whether they get bigger now in 2014 or whether it's a slow burning process, it's harder to say.
And the question about Nagorno-Karabakh, as we know, the ministers are meeting rather very often now. The second one will take place, I think the third one in January. And you see also the presidents are planning to meet to have another meeting very soon. What do you think? Is Nagorno-Karabakh is safer now when Armenia decided to join customs union? Do you think that Armenia somehow succeeded in avoiding war with Azerbaijan? What do you think? What happened here?
Russia is Armenia's main security provider, military ally, defender. So in that sense, having agreed to join the customs union also has a security aspect, and President Sarkisyan has talked about that. So in that sense, Armenians can feel a little more secure. Also, I think you have to understand that Azerbaijan really doesn't want a war over Karabakh. It likes, particularly now, gas pipelines and projects with the TANAP type pipeline with Turkey. Also, President Aliyev is now fairly secure. He's just been re-elected for another few years. So I think the positive side of what we're getting from the new meetings between the two presidents is a lowering in the rhetoric. I think the two presidents agreed that they would be more respectful to each other, that they wouldn't make so many threats as they've been making, particularly Azerbaijan. So that's positive. We've seen that. But I think this is not a meaningful peace process. This is not a meaningful peace process where the two men are sitting down and saying, we really want to find a peace deal, what do we want to do next? This is more process for the sake of process. This is more, talking in order to kind of lower the temperature, keep on talking, postpone any big decisions, keep the great powers happy, and really do nothing.
And the question about Turkey and the visit of Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu to Yerevan. What do you think? What did it change something in Armenian-Turkish relations? What was the major political thinking behind this visit?
Well, I think the fact of the visit was important. It showed that Davutoğlu, cares about Armenian-Turkish relations. He still wants something to happen. The fact that he went to Yerevan, I think was positive. But again, when we look at the substance of what was discussed, we see this big gap between the two sides, which I think is still, it's actually bigger than it was before the protocols were signed in Zurich in 2009. And the problem being that Turkey has basically decided that normalization with Armenia depends on something happening on Karabakh and Azerbaijan. And Armenia also clearly says that the two processes cannot be linked. What I'm told is that Davutoğlu made a strong pitch in Yerevan for his ideas about Karabakh, the idea of withdrawal from two regions in return for restoration of the railway, opening of the border. It's a plan which has its own logic, but I think what Davutoğlu doesn't understand is that the Armenian government and maybe most of the Armenian people are allergic to any kind of Turkish plan for Karabakh. So the two sides are really, it's a bit of a dialogue of the deaf at the moment. The Turks want to talk about Karabakh and the Armenians don't.
And your prediction about there are some in Armenia predict that this huge outflow of population and economic collapse actually could lead to the major social outburst. And what do you think about that? The social explosions, even they predict. What do you predict for 2014? Do you think is there any chance for that? Do you think the population will revolt?
Well, Armenians don't traditionally revolt over social issues, and also immigration is also a bit of a kind of safety, releasing the safety valve. That means that some of the people who would revolt are just leaving the country rather than staying to protest on the streets. So I think we will see protests in Armenia, and like in any society, it's hard to know what could cause them. But I don't think it will be a social issue. It would be something political, which would get people out on the streets. I think we can predict the unpredictable, because I think basically that most of the population is unhappy with the status quo. but the mainstream opposition hasn't been able to mobilize the people. But we could see something organic happen, something unpredictable, some issue which gets people out on the streets, and then I think there could come a moment when those protests become serious. Will that happen in 2014? Maybe not, but one day it could happen in Armenia.
So thank you very much, Tom.
No.
It was really very, very interesting.